Now we recognize our context is different. These ancient writings about creation are really ancient mythic cosmologies. They're trying to explain the universe. However, they have a little different emphasis than we do. Most of them are poetry in the ancient world. Poetry so it could be remembered. It was passed on orally, and it was poetic. So it's not unusual that Genesis 1, verse 1, through chapter 2, verse 3, as you can tell in modern translations, is indented because it's a poem. And so one thing we have to do is interpret not only the Bible in its context, which is a cultural and historic context, which we'll be doing in a moment, but you also have to say, what kind of literature is this? And so if I was an evolutionist and wrote a poem about evolution, you wouldn't hold me to some sort of strict literalness about what I was alluding to. You would know what I was talking about if I wrote about a poem about evolution. But a poem is not scientific data. And so don't expect to find some sort of scientific data given in this, because if the Bible had given a scientific explanation, they'd probably thrown it away years ago, because nobody understood the scientific perspective until maybe the last couple hundred years. So it would have been irrelevant to everybody else. Instead, the biblical text is relevant to that context, and I think by the time we get through, you'll see to our own. The stories of the ancient Near East have several themes in common. When you look at all the Egyptian, all of the ones, you put them together, here are some of the common themes about creation. One, a creator God made many lesser gods and are spiritual beings who rebelled against his rule. That's in almost all the stories, the Canaanite myths. In Canaanite myths, he's referred to as El. And in the Bible, oftentimes God is referred to El, which is an abbreviation for Elohim. And these forces rebel against the Creator God, but of course it's written from the perspective of the rebellious spiritual beings, so they're heroes. They're viewed in ancient mythology as heroes rebelling against the Creator God. The Bible doesn't agree with that myth, that these rebellious spiritual beings are heroes. But not only did they rebel against the Creator God in the accounts that we read, they also fought with one another for supremacy. Who's going to be the big dog God in the world? Who's going to be the one in charge of this region and be the one to head up all the others? And of course, each one argued that their God was the head God, and they had their own name for him, and the names differed. Marduk was the name of the god in Babylon. The god was Baal for the Canaanites, which just simply means the word Lord. But here I think is an important point. You read every one of their creation accounts. The material world, we find, was destroyed in all these accounts during this conflict between the spiritual forces, and chaos resulted. In other words, they saw the great spiritual battle between good and evil, different gods, etc., fighting one another, destroyed the planet in some ways. And so what they were looking for is their God came and restored order. And that's why he is the God. Because, again, chaos, when the weather patterns are upset, you can't grow your crops, when you can't have a city, etc., then you can't function. So it's written from the viewpoint of human beings and their functioning as civilization. So, number two, human beings, according to all these mythical cosmologies, were created to do the hard work that gods did not want to do. And that's funny, we view that kind of funny, but the idea is originally lesser gods created by the Creator God had to come down to the earth and work and dig the canals and help make the rivers and do all this. And they started complaining. They didn't like the hard work they were doing. And so they complained that they wanted somebody else to do the hard work. And that's where you and I come in the ancient mythology. They didn't want to do the work. And so we were created, and according to ancient mythologies, we exist only to serve the gods. We're here working the land, we're here working in the temple, we're here working as craftsmen, whatever we're doing, ultimately it's for the gods. And we're taking over there where we have to go out and get canals going to take the water so that we can irrigate the crops, especially in ancient Babylon. And so this was the view of the ancient cosmology. And third, these creation stories focus only on function, not the material process of creation. Now this is very, very important. You see, in modern setting, we are functioning on the material processes that brought our world to where it is today. Whether it be the Big Bang and the various things that happened after that, evolution, whatever explanation we have after that. These are referring to how things develop materially. Ancient cosmologies showed no interest whatsoever in that. They assumed that the God, creator God, gods made what we had, but what they were concerned about was, how did civilization develop? Why are human beings in the position that they are? And so, it's about the creation of human civilization, not the creation of the physical universe with all the galaxies and the stars and the planets. Their focus was on the creation that the gods did of civilization. A specific city, like Babylon, is made by one of the gods. So they claim the God, of course, who did the work? Human beings did the work, but they did it at the will of the gods, Marduk. A king is ordained. So in every one of these places, the God designates one family, one man, and his descendants will be the king, the ruler over this nation that is Marduk's. And then a wonderful temple is built. And once the temple is built, then the gods who've had to work rest. And so the allusion to the gods resting is the idea of civilization is fully functional, and they are bringing offerings and gifts to the temple, and the gods do not have to work anymore. Everything's well with the world. That's the creational accounts in the ancient Near East. These creation stories end with order in the human world and the gods resting in their temple. So let's look at just the beginning. You might want to open your Bibles to Genesis 1. I'm not going to put the whole verses on there. We'll look at some. But in Genesis chapter 1, let's look at the first two verses and see what they tell us. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, I think that's the creation account. Kind of what other mythical accounts and cosmologies assumed is that the Creator God made everything. And I think that's the creation account. It doesn't go into any detail about how and the methods, etc. And the reason why I think that is that, notice verse 2. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So it doesn't talk about the creation of the earth. It talks about the earth being in this kind of formless, empty, void. Sounds like what happened. These words are used elsewhere when there's been a terrible war and a whole city has been destroyed, the crops have been destroyed, everything's in disarray. And so it's talking about, if one reads it in light of the ancient Near Eastern writings, this is telling us something a little different than sometimes is meant. And then notice it goes on to say, and God said, let there be light. Remember, light's the first thing that happened. It doesn't talk about a sun. The sun doesn't appear until later on. It appears that the Bible is assuming that ancient catastrophic events occurred, and now at a later point, God is going to now, out of the fact that the world is in chaotic form, sounds like after asteroids hit, throwing all the dust in the air, you can't see anything, and the first thing you see is light. And then you begin to see some of the other features, and that seems to be what this is discussing. And just kind of read through and see if that doesn't kind of follow, from a human perspective, what you would see after a catastrophic event as the world gradually came back to productive normalcy. And so, here are the conclusions that I would draw. Again, these are all in your notes. This is a restoration of creation's functionality after a catastrophic event created chaos. So that's the first thing. So this is not an original talking about how the world was made materially, etc. Instead, it has the same interest as all the other ancient views, which was, how do we have human beings in a civilization functioning? And so this is going to tell us how that, and of course it ends with them, human beings being in a garden instead of a city. But that's the flow of the story. Second, it alludes, by the biblical account, to two rebellious spiritual beings referred to in ancient Near Eastern literature. So it agrees that there are these rebellious spirits who rebel against the Creator God. One of them is named Tiamat, or Timot, translated in the English version I just read, the deep. That the spirit was hovering over the surface of the deep. Timot. And Yam, which is translated the waters. Yam is more of a Canaanite word. Tiamat is more of a Babylonian word. The Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So all the people in the ancient world that read this would instantly recognize the Bible is alluding to two rebellious gods that rebelled against the Creator God. Instead of just reading this as just waters or the deep. And of course, ancient gods were associated with natural phenomena. Doesn't mean they were limited to that, but you can realize how threatening water was to the ancient people. Whether it be a tsunami, floods, or if they tried to travel on the sea, how easily people would get lost. People had a great deal of fear of the sea, and even saw monsters in the sea as representing spiritual forces in rebellion to God. Now, Satan is a Persian word that is late in origin. We're talking about, say, 500 or 600 BC is when that word came in vogue. But ancient Near Eastern literature refers to several rebellious spiritual beings. Leviathan, which is referred to as the many-headed dragon, kind of like you read in the book of Revelation. And Rahab, another, there are names besides Yam and Timot. As a matter of fact, they all come together in some later writings. Let's look at, it's not just this a creation account, but throughout the Bible, this is the view, that the world has spiritual beings that are in rebellion against God. Look at Isaiah 51. In Isaiah 51, verses 9 and 10. Awake, awake, the psalmist says. Clothe yourselves with strength, O arm of the Lord. Awake as in the days gone by, as in generations of old. Was it not you who cut Rahab to pieces? And you read in the ancient Near East, that was what happened when one god defeated the other. He literally cut them into pieces and then created the rest of the order out of the destructive body of this being. Who pierced that monster through. So God defeats the spiritual forces. Was it not you who dried up the sea? Yam. And the waters of the great deep? Timot. Who made a road of the depths of the sea so that the redeemed might cross over.